Okay, so one of the first things that I wanted to talk about, which people seem to get hung up about and are unsure about, is just curriculum. There's lots of people asking about, how to plan, how to develop a curriculum. Um, and obviously, there's an awful lot of talk when we talk about curriculum around children's interests. And an awful lot of people say, well, it's all about children's interests. Well, it is about children's interests, but curriculum is about what you want children to learn, and their interests is how you're going to teach it, in my opinion. So I think one of the things that you could do is think about, if you're in a nursery or if you're a childminder and you've got various age ranges, is think about, what does the child already know when they come to you? So you do need to have an idea of their starting points, observe them and just see what it is they already know. And then what's a really simple way to look at it is to think about, well, okay, let's imagine we've got a baby, 10-month-old or an under two. What is it you want that babe to learn by the time they move on to the next room, if they're in a nursery, or sort of stage if they're with a childminder? And then equally, if you've got a 2-year-old or a toddler room, what is it you want those children to learn before they move on to kind of a preschool room or, 3-4-year-old age and stage? And that starts to form the basis of what your curriculum should be. What is it you want them to learn? And by learn, we're talking about what it is you want them to know, what skills you want them to have, what aptitudes you want them to develop, what knowledge you want them to have gained by the time they've moved on to the next stage. And if you look at it that way, you will be sequencing your curriculum in a way that we know Ofsted want to hear. They want to hear how your curriculum is sequenced and building on what children can already do, and as they move through your setting. So one of the ways you can also look at that is you can look at kind of developmental guides. You can look at typical development of children in those ages and stages. But it's really important that you also really think about the individual child, and where they're at. So, for example, does the child speak English as an additional language? Is the child subject to child protection? Has the child suffered any trauma in their life? Are they new to the area? Have they got an SEN that you're aware of when they first join you? Could they be a gifted child? What's their position in the family? What's their family makeup? All of these things are important that you find out in the getting to know you stage with a child, getting to know the parents, getting to know the family, getting to know the child and their circumstances, which will help you know what you need that child to be able to learn and do while they're with you. So if we just use a really simple, typical example, because it happens in every type of setting, if you think about the routines of your day, so a nice simple example would be a mealtime. So when you're thinking about a mealtime in a baby room or, with a child under the age of 2, what is it you want that child to learn? Now, it may be that you want them to learn to drink from a beaker, whether it's a beaker with a lid or without a lid. You might want them to start using a spoon independently, and you might want them to pick up single words like more or tar or please or yes or no. So your teaching, which is, the how, will revolve around those issues, when that you will provide that child with a beaker. You might provide it without a lid or with a lid, depending on where the child is at. You'll provide the child with a spoon. You might have an additional spoon to guide them and help them. And you will be using words, modelling language as you're feeding or sitting with those babies and very young toddlers while they are eating. So if we move on to a 2-year-old room, mealtime, what is it you want those 2-year-olds to be able to do at mealtime? And what do you want them to have learned by the time they're ready to move on to preschool? So that might be that you are definitely want that child to be able to drink from an open cup and not a lidded cup. You might want them to be able to master over that time using a spoon and a fork. I like to say scoop or spike. You might want them to understand basic principles of hygiene, like washing their hands beforehand. You might be offering them a flannel to wipe their face for themselves when they've finished eating. You might be able to encourage children to peel some basic fruit, peel a tangerine, peel a banana. You might encourage those children to be able to pull the lid off a yogurt pot. And you will be using those words to demonstrate and to model as you're sitting with those 2-year-olds that are eating. You might want to introduce things like where food comes from, even the simplest of, milk comes from a cow. This is all what you've decided that you're going to talk about while you're sitting with a group of children who are eating. Okay, so let's now think about what you want a 3 or 4-year-old to learn, what they should be able to do when they're having a meal. And I am only giving really basic, simple ideas. You could have children that can do way more than this earlier. And that's about knowing the individual child, isn't it? And what they can already do. So again, basically you get to a 3 and 4-year-old and you think, well, what do you want that child to be able to do at lunchtime? Well, you definitely want them to be able to open their own yogurt pot, to peel their own banana, peel their own tangerine, possibly spread butter on their toast or crackers, pour their own drink into an open beaker, possibly scrape their plate clean at the end, put cutlery in a bowl, come to understand basic things about maybe recycling, like where containers go, where food waste might go, more ideas around healthy eating, what foods are healthy for them, what foods you should be encouraging them to eat. They might be chopping up their own vegetables. So when you look at that kind of sequence across the age ranges, it shows a clear sequence of learning, doesn't it, from a baby right through to a preschool room. And all that you really need to do is, or what I've seen done really well, is a really basic display in each room about the curriculum in that room. So, in the baby room, there might be 1 or 2 photographs of babies having their lunch with a few kind of captions around detailing what we've just discussed about what children might be learning. And do the same in the 2-year-old room and then in a 3 and 4-year-old room. And then it's a prompt for staff. They can go to that board and they can talk it through with visitors, with parents, with Ofsted, with the local authority, anybody that comes along to explain what it is the children are going to learn while they're in that room. And meal times are just one aspect of your day. There's so many other things we can add to that display board if we want to, that will really give a full and broad curriculum around what those children are going to learn, what you are going to teach while those children are in that room. Okay, so that's kind of the way I look at a sequence curriculum in a really basic and simple way. And we'll come on to talk about maybe different aspects of the day. I mean, we could talk in the same way about outdoor play. We could look at specific areas in each room that you might have set up and what children you want children to learn in those areas. And it doesn't need to be that there's lots and lots of planning. It just needs to be, do you know what you want children to learn at these key times in the day or in key parts of the room? And you using your staff to model the language, the vocabulary that's needed to extend that learning. Okay, I hope that was helpful. It was just really quick and simple. And we'll talk about another aspect of curriculum next time.